Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for the webinar today, where we will be introducing you to our partners at Fluence Technologies and their product, XLCubed. Thanks for moving that, Gary. Today, many of you know me, John Persisto. I'm the Revelwood Client Success Manager, and I have with me Gary Crawford, the Chief Operating Officer of Fluence Technologies. Gary's going to do most of the heavy lifting, and I'll start and finish as normal. All right, go ahead, Gary. Next one, please.
There we go.
All right, just a quick hit. Many of you already know me. You know Revelwood, and you know what we've been doing. For the few of you that don't though, Revelwood's been providing solutions to the Office of Finance for over 25 years, with hundreds of successful implementations. Working with our partners at IBM and Workday Adaptive Planning, Blackline, and Fluence, we bring extensive FP&A and accounting expertise to every project we work with. We always look for better ways to serve our client base, both during and after implementations. And to that end, we've invited our partners at Fluence to introduce their product, XLCubed, to you. And XLCubed, as you'll see through the presentation and through the demo, is meant to help you ease your reporting needs by allowing you to connect to and pull data from multiple sources into one Excel report. I'm going to pass it over to Gary and let him jump in with the presentation, do the demo, and then we'll catch you at the very end. So Gary, go ahead.
Great, John, thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Great to talk to you all today. I managed to get in the webinar just a few seconds before it started, so it's a little close to the bone. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. So a brief background on XLCubed. First of all, so XLCubed was originally founded in the UK over 15 years ago now. We basically provide self-serve reporting tools and analytical tools, and our products are used across most business departments, but for sure the sweet spot really is the Office of Finance. We have around 750 customers, a little more, ranging from mid-sized to corporate, and anywhere from 5 to 5,500 users on the larger side. And then in quarter 4 last year, XLCubed, as John mentioned, was acquired by Fluence Technologies. So there's a great fit really between the two companies. Fluence are based out of Toronto and have been partners of Revelwood for a little while now. Fluence provide solutions around the close process, so financial consolidation, account reconciliation, and soon disclosure management. And then alongside that, of course, financial reporting, which is where XLCubed fits in and we'll be focusing today. But for sure, if you want to talk about any of the other solutions, John and the team will be happy to discuss those as well. So moving on to XLCubed in terms of what it is and what it does and how it aims to help you as the lens to the data rather than the store for the data. So it's about connecting an extended version of Excel through to underlying databases. And we connect to a number of different data sources, including things like analysis services from Microsoft, Power BI datasets, to TM1, to Airspace, to some of the big data providers, things like Kairos and equivalent products to that. We're also working on connectors at the moment for Adaptive from Workday and for various other things like Anaplan and tool sets like that. But really, what we try and do is take the Excel environment that you know and give you a smarter way to work with it. So extending it in terms of reporting capabilities and analytic capabilities. And when it comes to then sharing those reports, you can do that through the data connected Excel environment, or you can also publish those reports to a web portal, which can be run on premise or in the cloud, and essentially is a great way to add an additional layer of governance onto those Excel developed reports. Once you publish from Excel to web, excuse me, the reports are version controlled, but anyone with a browser or with a mobile device can then access those reports, and they can be potentially responsive as well, so they'll work nicely on mobile devices. The web platform also caters for automated distribution, so you can automate delivery of reports by static PDF or Excel or PowerPoint. Okay, so why XLCubed? And there's lots of reasons, but if I just focus on a number of the key ones to begin with today. So we're really talking about a solution which is finance owned. So it puts finance in control of their own reporting requirements, whether that's answering the report of today for analytics, or whether it's highly formatted reports. There's a low learning curve. There's fast user acceptance, so you can leverage many of your existing Excel skills. There's no coding required. You don't have to learn any specialist horrible language around DAX, MDX, or whatever it might be. And it connects to multiple data sources. So we realize that for many organizations, there is not just one version of the truth. There are several data silos, essentially, which people need to connect to, and we connect to multiple sources. We give the option for what we would call pixel perfect reporting, so full control over the layout and over the formatting in an environment that users already understand within Excel. We provide flexible slicers, we provide a number of template reports to help you get started, but it does help you deliver the type of reporting that some of the classic BI tools would struggle with, which often means highly formatted tables and formal financial statements, that kind of thing. Alongside that, there's a rich analytic environment, so the ability to get to the data you want to query quickly and easily, to add your own calculations, and to further explore that data really through some advanced number decomposition and some other techniques that are baked into the product. We don't consider ourselves a dashboard tool for sure, but we do provide some real value adds in terms of finance-focused charting and data visualization. We make it very easy to build waterfall charts, variance charts, the type of charts that FP&A often live and breathe. We do those in a data-connected way and in an interactive way, so you're able to actually explore the data through the charts. And then ultimately, anything which you build within the Excel environment, you can share through the web portal if that's the way you choose to go, and those can be fully responsive, so they can play nicely on mobile devices. So that's actually everything I wanted to cover from a PowerPoint perspective, and I wanted to spend the rest of the time looking at the product itself. So let's just step out of PowerPoint and step across into the world of XLCubed within Excel. So this is just one example report. We'll take a look at a few, and we'll actually spend a lot of time building from scratch. But some of the key things around the tool then are, as I mentioned initially, it's all about connecting Excel to underlying data. So when I add a new connection, that opened on the wrong screen. But when I add a new connection, as did the next dialog, you'll see that there's a range of connectors available to me. So, we have things like analysis services, we'll have Power BI, TM1, a range of sources, Kairos, as I mentioned earlier. And the whole idea is that once you add a connection, you're able to report meaningfully against that connection within the current database, within the current workbook. You can add multiple different connections to completely different data sets and databases within one workbook, and you can potentially report on those together in a consistent, coherent way. So initially, we'll just focus on a couple of data models, but I'll show you a little bit around bringing different data sets together a little further through the demo. So the reports you build can be anything you can do in Excel, in KPI type scorecard, like we have screen at the moment, or whether it's a classic financial statement, be something like this, or more of a interactive dashboard like we have here. You're able to build that all in a data connected way within Excel, and then share with other Excel users or share through the web, which we use. So what I'm going to do now is, and actually the web sharing process is very, very straightforward. It's really a case of just any report you build, make a simple connection, some of the real building blocks within the product. They can help your day-to-day reporting needs, really. So first of all,
Hey, Gary,
we
this
have a
is
number to
Eric.
enable
I just want to
services
jump in for a
from Power
second.
BI,
Your audio is
and
very, very choppy at the moment.
Okay. Let me just check my Wi-Fi. I mean, I'm plugged into a headset, so if there's an issue, it's going to be on the Wi-Fi side. To do much about it, unfortunately. Is it any better now?
Sounds a little bit better now. Seems a little intermittent.
Yeah, it sounds
Okay, well, touch wood, it's going to stay in there. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's a number of different ways to get data into the tool. The first I'm going to cover is a grid, and a grid is like fundamentally very similar to a pivot table at the lowest level, but you can think of it as being a pivot table on steroids, is how some people describe it. So there's much more ability there in terms of what it allows you to do. But at the simplest level, there's a initial design, which I can bring up just now, where you can model down the left-hand side, and it's a case of position you'd like to use on columns, on rows, or on the filter area of the report here. So as soon as I click an individual hierarchy, I can see the content of the hierarchy here, and I can drag whatever I'd like to pick to the right-hand side. So in this, you can see I've picked 4 years, and I've hence got 4 columns. And there's different ways to look at that. There's a task pane environment, which gives me a design time view on the grid. The whole environment is drillable and slice and diceable. So I can drill on either axis and back again and up again. I can slice and dice to change how I'm looking at the data. So I might want to look at geography split by product and then drill into product here, or the other way around. I can quickly change exactly how I'm looking at the data. So one of the key things about the product is actually the flexibility it gives you when it comes to selecting data. And if I show you what I mean there in a couple of ways. So firstly, when I'm selecting geography, currently I've just selected all the countries, but if I clear that, I can come along and pick United States, and I can see on the left-hand side, it goes from the country to the state level to the city level. So on the drop down, I can go directly to any one of those. I can pick the children, which would be all the states, or I could pick the cities, which would skip that level entirely and show me the city level underneath the US, or you can do things like between, so maybe from the state to the city. So all of those selections are easy to do. It's a family tree type naming convention, and they're all dynamic, i.e. the number of rows which is being retrieved may vary based on the underlying data. So it's a dynamic selection that you're making to do that. And if you think about that same process from a financial perspective, from a chart of account perspective, so I've got a grid here, which is based on a finance cube, I'm quickly able to go to the account structure, which is on the rows. I can clear the current selection, and I could, for example, say, I'm interested in net income, and I just want to see the entire structure. So show me the descendants. That gives me the entire structure of the net income leg of the chart of account. And with the grids, you can always just go back through previous steps to where I was previously. So you can always go back and redo the changes that you had in place to end up where you started off. So there's a lot of flexibility for sure around the selections, and it's not just within our dialogue. And what do I mean by that? I mean really that if I go back to this example, when I pick geography here, we have the tree picker at the top, but we've also got a range selector at the bottom. And that really allows me to leverage the rest of Excel. It basically means I can pick up selections from elsewhere within the workbook. So when I pick the range picker here, I can go to potentially a list of, in this case, cities, which is held elsewhere in the workbook, and the grid will then retrieve based on that list. So you can see it's dynamically picked up the content of that prior list. That could be done in the filter area, so I could just type in something I wanted to retrieve and have the grid filter based on that. Or as I just showed, it can be picked up from literally a list of data held in Excel, and you can use that to actually bring, that's one way to bring information together from two different types of data source. The other thing that we add into grids, excuse me, is the ability to easily and quickly add custom calculations. So we don't want users to have to learn any special syntax. We're in Excel and we all know how to add a calculation in Excel. So here, if I go to the ribbon on the grid at the top, I can add either a column or a row calculation. And if I add a column calc first, I'm just going to call it actual to budget percentage, so shorthand. And then down beneath that, if I say regular Excel formula, it's equal to actual minus budget divided by budget. Okay, so I now want to format that so that it's a percentage. So I can format, make it a percentage, 1 decimal, that's fine. And you can see that's taken. So that dialog was a standard Excel dialog, i.e. nothing to learn. The formula was a standard Excel formula, nothing to learn. The only thing you need to remember is you need to add the calculation from the button here, column or row calculation. But once I've added that, that's drillable with the grid. So you'll see it expands as I drill further into the grid. And then also it's actually dynamically tied to the data set. And the easiest way I can show you that is to just move date onto columns. And then if I drill into it a few times, you'll see that the calculation itself is repeating for each split of data. So when I look here for Q1, you can see it's doing the correct calculation. When I look for August 2019, it's doing the correct calculation. So really it's giving you a dynamic Excel-based calculation which can grow and shrink as you analyze the data further. And they certainly get used an awful lot within the product. Not really a calculation as such, but something certainly that people also use a lot is the ability to really understand what's going on behind an individual number. So if I just go up to the top level of this data set again, let's say we want to understand a little more about the 2021 number for the US. So to do that, we can run some number decomposition, which we call breakout. And the breakout is a way to split this number out by any other part of the data. So in this case, I may want to look at product. And I would say I want to see the subcategories which are making up this number. I want to do top 15, just so it's not a regular top 10. I'm going to position it here. So that gives me a little sub-report, which is showing me the top 15 categories and then everything else. And you can see, obviously, that sums up to the number that we started with here. So a really quick way to give some additional context to the headline number that you're looking at. And if I click elsewhere within the grid, the breakout is going to update to reflect the active cell that I select. So you can see now I'm looking at 2020 Canada, and the update here will, sorry, the breakout here will update to reflect that. Okay, we also make it very easy to add interactive selectors to the data. So you may not want, if you're building a report for others, you may not want them to use, this full designer dialog to make filter selections, for example. So we can ease that process by just adding a simple slicer. So I could add a slicer here. Could be a tree view like we have here. I could make it buttons. I could make it a list box, combo box, lots of flexibility around how that side of things works. And if I want to change it to something else, it really is just a case of move the slicer elsewhere, potentially resize it, change the look and feel. So I want it to be buttons. I'd press here and go ahead and make it buttons. The slicers are actually very, very flexible within the tool, and they do give you options to bring data together from different data sets, which I'll talk about a little bit now. So in this example, there's actually two connections in this workbook. We have one to a TM1 source and one to an analysis services source. And you'll see when I pick the slicer at the top that both of the grids underneath are actually going to update. So I'm picking North America, everything's going to be filtered now by North America all the way across. So how do we achieve that kind of thing where we've got one slicer driving two entirely different data sets? There's actually a few ways you can do it in the tool, but the basic way this one's working is that the slicer itself can be set up so that it's directly linked in this case to the TM1 model, but it can be set up so that it will output its selection to a cell. So when I pick Canada in this slicer, it's actually updating the TM1 grid directly, and it's also outputting the selection to this cell. So it's outputting Canada into this cell. This grid, which is to the Microsoft environment, is then filtered by actually this area of data. And we're doing some Excel logic to say that in the case of, if I pick UK in the slicer, well, actually UK doesn't even exist in this data set. So I'm mapping it across to United Kingdom so that I can filter this data by United Kingdom. So we're using a little bit of just Excel logic to ensure that the slicer can drive content across multiple data sources. Even if the data itself doesn't exactly match, we can set up some Excel logic to make it all work. So it's really helping you use the type of Excel skills you already know to, to make things work how you want them to work. So in this case, the grid on the right is just linked to a range of cells and filtering through that. There's a few other ways we can work coherently to bring different data sets together, but that's one of the most commonly used ones, I would say. And having jumped across, and we have a simple TM1 example here. If I just take a look at one other example, which is built on TM1. So if I open up this one, really the reason I'm bringing this one up is just to say that, depending on the data source we're connecting to, there are some different functionalities available. So in the case of TM1, obviously it's a write enabled environment. So in this case, I can overtype a value. You can see it updates the number, it updates the summary at the bottom. Also from a design environment, if I open up the designer here, if you have views, which of course everyone does, defined in the central model, you can pick them up directly from the server and use the view as your grid design. And when it comes to sets, the sets are available to select here as well. So that's TM1 specific functionality. Also, we're able to leverage the spreading dialog, so we make it a little easier to use those. So I can say I want to do a data spread. I want to do, let's say, a growth percentage. So starting from 75 with 10% growth. And I want that to carry across to the right. Not sure if that was driver error or not, but that should basically apply the TM1 shortcut and go ahead and do the spread across the piece, which it does when I demo it generally, but not sure what's going on just there. Okay, so the grids that I've shown so far have been analytical. They've been, getting to an endpoint, adding some calculations, that kind of thing, but they are actually highly formatable as well. So if I go back to this workbook and we take a look at a formatted grid, which we have here. So in this example, you'll see that when I change the slicer, the number of rows is going to vary. So you see the rows potentially vary, the number of columns will vary, but all the formatting remains in place. So we formatted the higher levels and we've added some column breaks and row breaks and things like that. So the way that this works is that you can use standard Excel dialogues. So if I come in here and say I want to format either the member, or in this case, the level. So let's say we want to format the lower level as italic, and maybe we want to give it a backfill as well. Just something that we can see, really. Having applied that, you'll see that that took across the entire grid, everything at that level in the grid has taken that new format, and that will now dynamically get applied as the number of rows grow or shrink or whatever it may be. So it's actually very easy to set up highly formatted grids that are going to look exactly how you want them to finish up in terms of a final version report. So you can use the grids in final version reporting too, and lots and lots of people do. It's a core part of the XLCubed product. But alongside the grids, we have a formula-based reporting model. So this is still a grid at this point in time. So the whole thing is one object. But I can take the grid and I can convert that to formulas. So if I convert to formulas here, you'll see now that I end up with a series of these XL3 lookup formulas behind each and every number that we're looking at here. For those of you familiar with TM1, it's akin to a DBRW formula, but the syntax is a little different. For those of you not, the basic benefit it gives you is that any value can be positioned anywhere in the workbook, or in the worksheet, sorry. So you're completely non-restricted in terms of layout. So if I wanted to build a side-by-side balance sheet like we have here, I can do that really easily just by positioning the formulas where I want them to be. The syntax is straightforward. It's basically saying that for the date fiscal hierarchy, I want to retrieve whatever's in S8, which is March 21. For the scenario, whatever's in S9, which is budget. For net income, it's picking up net income on the account hierarchy as well. And it's really easy then to just move things around and position them as you want within the model. So here, I could move previous year to the left. I could move current year to the right. And I end up with a report which is still filterable by these selectors at the top, and which I can still drill down into as I choose. And you're typically going to end up, if you're using the formula reporting model, you're using that to build something which is highly formatted, maybe something which is more like this example with a few slicers at the top, but it's laid out exactly how I want my company income statement to be laid out, and it's still drillable, as you saw in the previous example. Okay. One last area that I think is an interesting one is the concept of template reports. So we've pre-baked into the product a number of template reports which are quick and easy for you to build and require very little effort, but you get a nicely formatted report at the end of it. If I show you one example, this is something we're extending, but if I show you one example, and I'd say this is a classic FP&A style report, I'm going to use this template. It's really taking a point in time or a month, and it's allowing me to, everything's opening on the wrong screen again. It's allowing me to essentially fill in the gaps so that I get a meaningful report at the end of it. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is pick a period that I'm interested in. So I'll go for June 2020 as my baseline. In terms of the value that I want to see, I'm going to use the sales amount. So I pick sales amount here. And then it's a case on rows of what I want to see the variance split by. I'll add an additional filter. I probably won't use it, but I'll add an additional filter to the top. But yeah, here it's a case of what I want to see on rows. So what do I want to see the variance based on? So in this case, I will say I want to see it for all countries, and I also want to see the states beneath the countries. So in one fell swoop, we should get a nicely formatted final version report, which moving from month to month, all we've got to do is change the month selection for. So you can see this is for June 2020. On the left-hand side, we're showing the selected month, we're showing the current value for that month, and we're showing the equivalent values in the prior year. We then have the variance shown in a bar chart and the percentage variance in a lollipop chart. And on the right-hand side, we've got exactly the same thing, but year to date. So it's done the year to date calc on the way through. That was all done in the context of a date hierarchy, which moves from year to quarter to month. If your date hierarchies are modeled in two separate dimensions or two separate hierarchies, you can handle that on the way through too. You just need to specify the two hierarchies that you want to use. When it comes to charting, we provide a number of different tools within the product that actually work very well for financial reporting. So we have a whole library of these in-cell charts. It's like a superset of what's available in native Excel, but essentially they can be used to just simply extend an existing table of data so that you can maybe see the actual target here through the bullet graphs, or a quick overview of the trend, which we have alongside here. The charts, if I just navigate through this report really quickly. So let's say we're interested in net revenue. I can click here. It's an in-context link to a second sheet showing me net revenue by product. And from here, I might want to slice and dice the data behind that further. So I could go to the slice and dice sheet. You'll see this has got some embedded charts within it. And all I wanted to show was that when I drill down further into the data, the charts will carry down through. So they can be used dynamically within a grid. And I could move the, I could slice and dice by region, move it down here, drill across, all that kind of thing. So those can be really useful, but the charts I actually wanted to focus on are what we call dynamic charts within the product, and they can be super helpful as well. So I'm going to look at them in the context of a variance waterfall. And the basic, which I'll build in a second, because clearly this is not a variance waterfall, but the basic idea is that these charts connect directly to the data rather than having to pull the data into Excel and then chart that range. So this is actually the designer for this chart, which we're looking at the moment. And we have a number, this is pre-filtered just to save some time on the webinar today. So I've selected a measure, I've selected a country, and maybe a product as well. But the part I wanted to show you was that the chart types we provide are all your regular chart types across the top. And then we have some specific ones which are really looking at variances, integrated variance charts, and a number of different waterfall charts. And we'll focus just now on a variance waterfall, which is going to take, in this case, 2 points in time, so 2019 and 2020. And it's showing me where the difference has been across those. So this is looking at sales to begin with. I could change it so that we're looking at the variance by month. So we can see at the start of the year, we're actually doing worse than the prior year. And in the second half of the year, we're doing much better than in the prior year. So you can see the growth and what caused the growth. Where I think it becomes much more interesting is when we start to split this out by something that isn't just time. So I can move product down onto the split by hierarchy here. Product is actually linked to the slicer at the top. And just to give us something that's much more meaningful, I'm going to just change its selection so that it's based on the children of whatever's in the slicer at the top. So then when I pick all products, it shows me the main categories, and we'll just grow, grow, grow. When I pick a subcategory, like components, for example, we can see exactly what's driven the growth in components overall. So we can see that it's primarily mountain frames, road frames, and touring frames, and we can see the current and the prior value. We can also see right at the top here that wheels have actually dropped off a little bit. This is all, you can see it's filterable by whatever I choose here. I could also choose to look at different regions. So if I move geography down onto columns, I could select maybe Australia, Canada, and Germany to display alongside France. And then that will give me just a multi-chart view, so a small multiple view, charting exactly the same data. So you do have that ability too within the tool. I think often when people are using this type of variance waterfall, What they actually want to do is identify essentially the long columns where what's driving the change, and then further explore that. And you can do that in the product by essentially on the chart properties. When I click one of these categories, I want to output it to a specific cell. So I'm going to output it just here. And it just means now that when I click an individual column, this grid is filtered by that cell. So you can see that it's now showing me if I scroll over a touch, you can see that it's basically now showing me the 2 years split for France, the percentage difference. I can click on another segment. It will update to show me that. So there was no data for the prior year. So you can see what's driven the change. And if I were to update the region here, everything's going to update, for that new region that I've specified, as you can see. So those charts can be really useful. You can ultimately build them into a more polished final version report, maybe something like this one, where the variance waterfalls at the bottom are actually driven by the chart I select at the top. You can see that Australia is now filtering the 2 charts at the bottom, or whichever other one I select would be doing that. I could click on road bikes, and that will show me the regional split within Australia specifically for road bikes, which we can see has fallen off. And just by doing that, it shows me it actually fell off specifically in Queensland and in New South Wales. Okay, so that's the core building blocks, I would say, within the Excel add-in, and there's a lot there for sure. But when it comes to distributing the reports, you may want to do that through Excel if it's going to a limited set of users, or alternately, you can do that, as I mentioned earlier, through the web portal. So you can take anything you build in Excel, you can make a connection through to the web server, choose the folder and press publish. And that's all dependent, of course, on you having the right permissions in the first place to do so. But once that's done, the basic idea, this is the homepage for the web product. The basic idea is you navigate the folder structure and you open the report you want to access. You can have pre-bookmarked favorites, which you use regularly. So if we take a look at one of those example reports, which we touched on earlier. So this is the first one we looked at. You can see it looks and feels the same on the web. I've still got the slicers. So it's still connecting directly to the underlying data source. I can still do that cross-sheet analysis, the in-context links. And when I go to the slice and dice, I can still, drill down into that, and I could, change what I'm looking at, look at things the other way around, drill into it further. That's all available within the web tool. A couple of other things I'll describe rather than show. You do have the ability to print this, and it does print well. So it will print exactly the same way as it did in Excel, whether it's landscape or portrait. You can save down into Excel, you can save into PowerPoint. You get the option to burst as well. So I could pick several months and it would run the report 3 times and then output it into PowerPoint or into Excel. So all that capability is there too. Excuse me. But the types of report in the web environment will obviously vary from anything you built in Excel. So if you were looking at an income statement comparison here across 2 scenarios, a simple example of that allows me to choose the scenarios I want to compare. So whether it's plan to the best case forecast or to the lead case forecast, or I could take my, a comparison between my best, my lead case, my best, my worst forecast. You've got all that can be hooked in dynamically using those charts, interactively display it however you choose. The web environment, as I touched on briefly earlier, does also give you the ability to render reports which you want or which you assume people are going to access through their mobile devices. So you're able to build in Excel a report which, once published to the web, is completely responsive. So by that, I mean when the screen size changes, everything shrinks to fit. If I make it significantly smaller, it's going to arrange in a meaningful way that you could then access on your mobile phone. So you've got that ability as an Excel user to build something that's going to play nicely on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android, whatever it may be. All this interactivity is available on whichever device you're accessing it through as well. So you can go from, there's cross filtering going on in this example. I can link out to related reports, for additional detail behind the scenes. Everything in the web environment can be embedded in other portals very, very easily. Individual reports can be accessed through a URL. So that URL will take me directly to that specific report. And that just means that you could embed it in an iframe in a custom portal. There's also a JavaScript API to do that at a much more detailed level. And one of the environments which we see our users use XLCubed for quite a lot is actually Power BI. Now, a lot of the time they're using the Excel add-in to connect to Power BI data sets, because Power BI is not particularly good for, for formatted financial reporting, whereas the Excel add-in is very strong there. So you can use XLCubed to hook in directly to the data set, do that financial analysis, build those financial reports, and run with it from there. But in addition to that, we've got the ability to hook XLCubed web reports directly into Power BI reports. So in this example, excuse me, this is really taking a mixture of a standard Power BI report and an XLCubed report and bringing the two together. I'm not sure why it's taking quite so long to open, but I suspect it may be my internet access is a little limited at the minute. So let me try that one again. So the idea here is that the left-hand side of the report is built in native Power BI. These are Power BI filters. This is a Power BI chart. The right-hand side of the report is actually XLCubed. So this is a report built in Excel, published to XLCubed Web, and then we have within the Power BI environment a custom visual which allows you to add XLCubed content in just the same way as you would add regular Power BI content, and you can set filters between it. So in this case, when I click on the bar chart to the left, it's going to filter the XLCubed content to the right, as you can see. So you're able to build something where you're really bringing the two reporting tools together at the time you're viewing the report. So something that's completely interactive, and where XLCubed can potentially fill in the gap in Power BI easily in terms of formatted reporting like this, in terms of maybe some specific chart types, like the one at the top, the integrated variance chart at the top. So a number of ways to achieve that too. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to cover. And just to summarize, certainly from our perspective, and the design goal of the product is to help people use Excel, but to use it in a smarter way. It's connecting to data. You're not storing the data in Excel. And there's a number of smarts within the product that remove the kind of pain points of your classic pivot table and go far and beyond what most of the other Excel add-in environments will allow you to do. So I hope that's been useful. I hope it's given you a little background on XLCubed. And with that, if I can pass back to you, John.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. If you want to click up the last slide there in the presentation, just so folks have the contact info. Everybody, I appreciate you spending some time with us today. I hope you found this informative. And look for an email from me. I'll be reaching out to everybody just to see if you have any questions, need any additional information. So look for that email from me shortly. Thanks again. I think we hit our time right on, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.